Hello everyone and welcome to my Java tutorial series. In this particular episode I am going to be going over the JOptionPane input and output stuff. I wanted to go ahead and go over input and output now, even though it would seem like something to do later, because I just wanted to be able to have something to easily show what the code is producing, to show sort of like examples rather than just doing what I did with the variables and just say, kind of just trust me, which I can do with the variables because it's fairly simplistic and it is easy to just say, here's what it's going to do. But with, stuff whenever you're doing like if statements and while loops and stuff like that, it's easier to kind of show what it would actually be producing. So I want to go ahead and go over that so I'm not just typing code that doesn't make sense to people. I really wanted to try to avoid putting in any code unless it's absolutely necessary to just make sure that everything is understood in a very progressive way. So, anyway, on to the JOptionPane stuff aside from all that whole nonsense. So, to get started with this, we're going to need to create a variable, a string variable. It's going to be named output. And we're going to use this to store the input that we get from the user, and then we can that'll be put in output, and then we can print that out as a variable. So essentially we're going to use JOptionPane like I mentioned. So you're going to need to actually type out JOptionPane, all caps like that. Well, not all caps, but the camel case with the first letter also capitalized. Because what this is going to actually be calling a class. Now, I'm not going to get into what classes are, but it's going to be saying, okay, go to the JOptionPane class and go to the show input dialog method, and I want you to create a box that is going to get input, and it's going to say whatever we want it to say. I'm going to do please enter an input, colon, space, in quotation, semicolon. So essentially what this is doing is it's going into the JOptionPane class, going to this method, and then it's going to pass it this string right here as an argument. And it's going to use that string in the creation of the box. Now, I know we have like the dot and we have, just a lot of, random typing and stuff here. It'll make more sense exactly why we're doing all of this as I get into talking about how methods and classes work. But just know for right now that that's the way you have to type it to be able to make this work. And the dot in Java sort of represents diving deeper. So by saying dot, we're essentially saying, okay, we have JOptionPane, but then we need to go more specific and go to show input dialog. So it's sort of like if you want to think of it in the terms of folders and stuff, you can say, okay, JOptionPane is the folder, and then we need to go to a file, so we do dot, and then show input dialog is the file. So, if you want to think of it that way, you could, I guess you could think of this like a slash if you're looking at folders, sort of like a slash. But anyway, now you may or may not have a red line underneath JOptionPane. If you do, you need to make sure that you do an import statement, which is up here all the way at the top. Eclipse sort of auto-imported it for me as I was typing it because it knew that was an error, and it knew what to do, so it went ahead and imported it for me. This statement is necessary. You'll actually use it quite a lot whenever you're doing any Java program. Because a lot of the time, while there are certain things that you can use, for instance, the math class with all of the math stuff in it, you can use all of those things, and you don't actually have to do an import statement. But with a lot of classes in Java, you do have to actually specifically tell Java where it's located, which is what this is doing. So it's saying, I want you to go and find, which is what this import does. I want you to go and find javax.swing.joptionPane, and I want you to be able to access that so I can use all of the code inside of it. So the javax.swing.joptionPane, it's just basically it's listing the folders and the exact file. If I put slashes here, it would make a lot more sense. So put slash, and then it's literally like you're browsing your Windows files or your Mac files or whatever. If like you go to pictures and then, hotels and then, I don't know, the sleep in, you've got your, I don't know why you would have pictures of that, but you would have your folders, and then you would have your specific file or something, and that's essentially what we're doing here. So that's sort of what the dot represents, if you're wondering. And then we just go in there, and then it tells it, okay, access the JOptionPane, and then there it is. A lot of the time, I rarely even know the exact sequence to type in for the import statement. If it's giving you that red line, just hover over it. See, if I were to get rid of this right now, it would give me this error. I can hover over it, and it says 7 quick fixes available. The first one being an import statement. Just click it, it'll auto do it for you. So a lot of the time, you can just let your compiler take care of that. You don't even have to worry about typing it yourself. So anyway, that's that. Now, we need to get the input from the user and store it somehow. Now, this entire statement is actually doing a lot of things. I'll go ahead and show you what I mean. If I run this program right now, I'll just click the little green button, this little box will pop up. Now, if you're doing this for the first time, I've actually done this in testing a couple times. For me, for some reason, it went ahead and popped behind all of my menus and just on the desktop. So you may need to look there, because it's not going, if it comes out first, it's not going to actually be in front of everything. It's just going to go behind it for some reason. So you need to look there to make sure. And it's also not going to be on the taskbar, because it's just running inside of Eclipse, so it's not going to be its own separate program. But anyway, we get this cool little box with the words that we put in here printed right there. And then we're going to need to type something in here. So we could type in test, test, test. No spaces. We click OK or hit enter. Nothing happens at all. Not a problem. Except if we actually wanted to store what we typed. I mean, sure, we get a cool looking window, but I mean, what are we going to do? Well, I mean, this entire thing, it processes the input, it provides a little box, it does all kinds of fancy things. So actually all we have to do is do output equals, and then that. It may look weird if you're thinking about it, because if you're just used to doing the variable thing, it can make sense if you do, like x equals y, or x equals 5. But if you do x equals, and then in this big long series of equations, it can look complicated, but when you break it down, it makes sense. Because if you do x equals y plus z divided by the square root of something or another, it may look complicated, but really it is solvable, and it does make sense. So this is sort of what that's doing. This big long statement is going to just return a single value of whatever we type in. Well, not a single value, but if it's like a number or something, it'll just be that single variable of number, or single string variable. So it's just going to return one variable basically. So that works. But now we have to actually print it out to the screen. So we can do that very easily. All we have to do is JOptionPane again, .show. This time we're going to use message dialog. There's a lot of different dialogs that you can go through and browse if you wish to, but in this particular case, I'm going to use message dialog, and then I want to type null, comma, and then we actually got to type the message, which we can do your input was colon space semicolon. I'm not going to put the output in there just yet. Now we have to type this null first, because of just the way it's set up. It is requiring us to put in a component. But since I don't actually have a component to provide, and in this case I don't even know what kind of component it wants, I don't even know what a component is in this case, it wants us to provide one. We don't have one, so we just say null, I don't have one, and it's fine. Okay, null, that's fine. We'll just ignore that. So I don't know why that's the way it is, but that's just the way you have to type it. So if you wanted to go look and see what kind of components you can provide, that's fine. But it's not really going to matter. It'll work just fine if you put in null. Now this part right here is basically the message that is going to be displaying. All it's going to display is just a box with a message. That's it. So we want to say your input was, and then we want to actually put output in there. But we could put just output like that. We could just pass it the variable itself. But I want to also put your input was. So how do we do both? Because really at this point it's just one or the other. Because we can't do your input was, and then just kind of put output, because that's just going to actually say output. And if we just put it out here, output, it's not going to know what that means because it doesn't make any sense to the compiler. So all we have to do is put a plus sign and then output. And it's what it's going to do is going to do what's called concatenation. It's going to add it on to the end. That's what concatenation means. Add on to the end. So it's going to take the string your input was, and then it's going to literally take the exact characters that are in output and add it to the string your input was and make a new string that is just all of that. So it's all going to get put into one big variable that it's going to then take care of. It does all of that internally and just automatically. So you got to keep that in mind whenever you're doing this, because it doesn't put any spaces. It literally takes word for word both strings and just meshes them right together. So we actually need a space here after the colon so that it's like a space, and then whatever the word is or the characters or the numbers that we put in for the input will get put right there, because otherwise it'll just get meshed up right against the colon without any space. So you got to keep that in mind whenever you're doing these, that you might potentially have that sort of problem, and you might not have a space there, so you want to kind of put that in. And we could concatenate as many times as we want to. At the end of this, we could do, we could do something else. We could do like a period. You're welcome. Have a nice day, or something like that. And then it'll add all of that together and just mesh it right together. Let's see. This is actually useful because if you have say you have like a whole bunch of code or something, it goes all the way out here. You don't want to have like this huge big long line you have to be scrolling across. So you actually, if you hit enter, because if you remember, Java ignores all white space. So we could do this, and we could sit this over here, and we have sort of like a plus sign. It's going to concatenate the string that's down here. So it's a little easier to see because it just goes down to the next line and continues the string. We can't, because of the way strings work, if we hit an enter sign, whoops, it's just there. If we do an enter key, it's not going to work correctly. It actually automatically did the plus sign there. So we could get rid of the plus sign and do like that, but it's not going to work because the enter key is not a valid thing for the string to put inside of the string. So we actually have to, we have to end it and then do the plus sign, then the enter key, and then we can go down to the next line and write the rest of it. So the only time the white space isn't applicable is when within the ignore white space rule isn't applicable, is inside the strings. But that's okay. And I'm also rambling. So moving on, let's hit the run button and see what we got. So enter an input tutorial. Okay, your input was tutorial. You're welcome. Have a nice day. So pretty cool, right? Now, we could print out output as many times as we wanted inside of this, and the useful thing about this is that we can do things to output once that we've gotten it. We don't have to just print it out. We don't have to print it out at all. Really, the program could just close after we get the input, and we could just do things to output afterwards, and not have to ask the user for any more things. But that's entirely up to the programmer. This is just sort of an example. And it's really, really cool to kind of mess around with, and kind of, you could do some math stuff. So you could say, like, enter a number to, let's do some stuff. Let's do like sort of a mini little calculator thing here. It's not going to be too complicated. Let's see. First num. Let's rename some of these variables real quick. Do string. Second num, and then first num will be this. Please enter the first number to be multiplied. And then we'll do this. And then we could do the same exact thing just for second num. So we just type this. Enter the second number to be multiplied. And, well, okay, actually, enter the number. So enter the number. Okay, please enter the number to be multiplied. Enter the number to multiply by. That'll be the better wording, to multiply by. And then we can easily just do JOptionPane dot show message dialog null message is the answer is. Now here's something really cool that you can do. Java automatically knows when you're working with strings and when you're working with numbers by the kind of variable that you're using. So actually I'll have to convert these to numbers. I can't use strings. I just realized that. Okay, let me finish what I was saying, and then I'll change this up so it'll work correctly. Java automatically knows the difference between working with numbers and working with strings. So if you do like you know, output plus out plus 2, output plus output 2, and you want to concatenate those two because they're strings, you know, maybe output 1 is test and output 2 is test 2, and you want to just put them together so it says test 2. Well, it'll actually concatenate them and work, but let's say output 1 and output 2 is then changed in their numbers, and so you know you have 1 and 2, and you want to just do, I want to do, the answer is, you know, and then 1 plus 2. You could do plus 1 plus 2, and literally it will just print out 3 because it knows the difference between concatenating this and then adding these two. So it's going to concatenate the answer of the math equation. So Java's pretty intelligent in that it knows the difference between the different, you know, the numbers and the strings. So you don't have to really worry about having to tell Java the difference all that much. So it's very, very useful. But unfortunately, this is not going to actually work because I want to, you know, I want to add them up together inside of this line, and so I don't have to have another variable to do that. I could have another variable, but I have to convert these to numbers first. So I need to do let's just do byte 1, or let's see, byte first num, and then okay, byte first num. This should be second num. If I could type correctly, it'd be very, very helpful. Now we'll have to change all of this up because this is not correct anymore. So we'll have to do string input. Alright, so this is, I forgot about this up until this point. So what we'll have to do, because the way that this gets input, the way that the JOptionPane processes input is it's all in strings, regardless of whether it's a number or if it's the letters, because it has the potential for you to put in characters and words. So it just says, okay, well, if that's the case, everything's going to be a string. So what you have to do is you have to do what's called parsing. Basically, you have to tell Java to make a string into a number. Now, this will work just fine as long as the string only contains a number. So you kind of have to make sure that your user knows what to put in, which is why a lot of the time, whenever you're getting input in a program, it's never just like on a website or something. Whenever it just says to type in, your date of birth or something, and you put you put like 1/1/2001 or something, as your date of birth. Well, they have all kinds of systems in place to make sure that the user doesn't type in like, ha 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 ha, you can't know my birthday. You have to actually type in numbers because it'll tell that's incorrect. So they have all kinds of systems to make sure that the user will actually type in a number so they can correctly process it. But in this case, we haven't learned any of that. You'll have to make sure that you put that into future sections, because if you do the parsing and it's not a and you try to tell Java, okay, I want to make this a number, but it's just a whole bunch of characters, the program will just actually crash. So you have to be careful of that. But in this case, I'm going to be a good user and I'm not going to make the program crash. So what we need to do is we need to first of all we need to set first num equal to the parse, because essentially we're going to just say first num is equal to whatever the answer is. So we get first num equals input dot parse input. Wait, no. Parse. How is it? Parse integer. Is it? Or integer input. Oh, okay. I'm doing it wrong. I'm sorry. I got to make these integers because they only work. The parsing only works actually with integers. I apologize. I haven't done this in a little while, so just bear with me. Okay. So for this to work, you actually have to have these ints, because they don't have the. I don't think they have the functionality available to do bytes or lots of other things. So whenever you're getting the stuff from JOptionPanes, they have to either be ints or doubles. That's the two options that you can go with. All right. So we do. Let's see. First, all right, I think it's actually integer dot parseInt. There it is. Okay, had to remember what the command was. Input. There. So that's what you type. So first num is going to be equal to integer dot parseInt input. Now, what this is saying is integer is actually the class. So each of the variables, each individual variable, allows you to. They have sort of like variables that are associated with them, the classes themselves of the variables. And we don't actually need to import this. This is just there in Java, which is cool. So we're just going to say integer and then dot. We want the specific command parseInt. And then we need to pass it. We need to pass it the string variable that we want to parse. Now we could actually technically pass it like, we could do 10. That would technically work because it's a string. But if we knew that it was the variable, if we knew that the string was going to be 10, why can't we just assign it 10 in the first place? So obviously we're just going to put a variable in here. Variable is going to be input. So we're going to take the input, it's going to be a string. We're going to take that string value. We're going to turn it into an integer value and put it in first num. Again, this has to be all numbers. If there's even a space in there, it won't work. But we're going to put that in first num. We're going to do this again. So we're going to keep in mind that up until this line of code, input is going to be the same of whatever it is in here. So if we did this, if we put this here and we just put second num, it's going to be the exact same value as in first num, because input has not changed in the in between these 2 points in code. So we have to make sure that we do this in the right order. So this is going to be second num, because theoretically they would put a different number the second time. Input would get overridden and a different number would be put in here. And then we can do the answer is first num times second num, and we have to do a plus sign to concatenate it, and there we go. So this should work. So please enter the number to be multiplied. Let's do 10. Okay. Please enter the number to multiply by. Let's do 10. So theoretically, well, let's do 2. So we should get 20, right? The answer is 20. Cool. It works. So that's pretty much the basics to input and output, to be honest. That's about all there is for this. That's basically, when you're just starting out, using the input dialog and the message dialog, it could be really fun. I mean, this is just a really, really small, short little program. But I mean, you could do much more with this. You know, you could do once you learn how to do if statements, it opens up a huge world of opportunity. If statements just allow you to do so much, even with just a simple concept, which is going to be the next tutorial. And that's why I wanted to go over this first before I did the if statements, because it'll be very easy to demonstrate if I have a way of actually showing you what the code is going to be saying. So anyway, that's the input and output stuff. Just keep in mind that, you know, if you wanted to, let me see if these actually work with bytes, because I remember thinking that they wouldn't work. Let's find out. Byte dot. Do they work with bytes? They do. Okay, good. So it actually will work with any variable. You just have to type the capital variable name and then just parse bytes. So that's cool. I did not know that worked. I thought I heard somewhere that it didn't work. I don't know why I thought that. But anyway. Okay. So that's, again, that's about it for this tutorial. Please feel free to leave some feedback on what you think, because if there is a problem with the tutorial, you know, you don't understand something, I didn't explain something very well, I want to know so I can like re-record it and fix it, because I would like to try to do well. So anyway, that is about it, and I will see you in another tutorial or video or whatever. Bye-bye.